Dr. Sophia Vinogradov, thank you for appearing on Brainwaves today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you are a scientist working at University of California, San Francisco and San Francisco VA Medical Center to do some really cool research involving cognitive remediation therapy for schizophrenia, which I participated in an early version of your study, and it helped me. So it's great to talk to you again,
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
definitely. So I have a few questions to ask that I think our viewers might be interested in to learn more about. Um, let's give it a start. What first inspired you to investigate whether cognitive exercises might be useful to treat diseases with thought disorder symptoms like schizophrenia? And like, was there like an aha moment, or just kind of developed, or?
Kind of. I'm really glad you used the term cognitive exercises as well. And I like that term. I like the term cognitive training. I like those a lot better than the term remediation, because remediation sort of assumes that something is almost irreparably broken and you have to work around it, whereas training and exercises really have the notion that what you can take is perhaps a part of the brain or a system of the brain that's a little weak or not functioning as strongly as one would want, and you can train it to work better, more optimally. And my aha moment came when, after doing schizophrenia research for a number of years in terms of cognition and how some of the brain systems aren't functioning properly, I kind of got tired of thinking about what isn't working and wanted to start thinking about what could work better and how we could make it work better, and really focus again on this idea of treatment. And I had the great good fortune of meeting up with a basic neuroscientist named Mike Mersnick, who had some ideas about that as well. And we started our early work together that you participated in. And and here we are some years later, having learned quite a bit about how we can deliver different kinds of brain training exercises and help cognition in people with schizophrenia.
Very cool. So once you got started working with Mike Merzenich, you started out with a thing called Posit Science Brain Fitness, or at least that's what it's called now. But your program is based on that, and it builds different mental skills, cognitive skills. What specifically sort of skills does your program work on, and how do they benefit people with schizophrenia to improve these skills?
So what we've worked on, what we have focused on to begin with, is the auditory system and the verbal system, auditory processing and verbal learning. And we have focused on those because we know that they're not working well in schizophrenia, and that they contribute in some ways to some of the impairments that people experience. And so the exercises that we've studied the most are exercises that really focus initially on getting the auditory and verbal processing systems to function more effectively. We've also examined some other kinds of exercises, and we have some early data looking at other forms of training, the visual system, the system that's involved in processing social information. But the research isn't as far along as it is with the auditory and verbal learning.
Okay. I remember that's the program that I did, was the auditory and verbal primarily, and it helped me to, I think, be able to understand the nuances in people's voices in conversation better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of dovetails with the question I had next, and that's that you've seen that in your experimental statistical analysis of your experiments, that there's a significant number of improvements, or a significant improvement in most of your subjects, I guess like 60% for cognitive symptoms, but it also helps people improve their social functioning and quality of life. Can you explain a little how you think that happens?
Yeah, so what in that particular study, what we did is people participated in the auditory and verbal learning exercises, and then but we also then added in some of the visual processing exercises, and also some exercises that focused on things like face recognition, being able to identify emotions in faces, and so we used exercises for all of those domains. And we trained people very intensively for about 100 hours of training. And then what we did is we had them follow up and come back and reevaluate with us after 6 months. What we saw is that people who did this 100 hours of intensive training, 6 months later, we saw that there was a significant relationship between those who had made the most gains after training and also had increased activation signals in certain parts of the brain were also the people who were showing some improvements in social functioning. And we didn't see those results in the group that had played computer games or control condition for the same amount of time.
Yeah, and like I was saying, I experienced some of that myself, so I know what you're saying is from firsthand point of view accurate.
Right, and we think that what happens is people can hear nuances in voices better, they can track conversations better, they can remember verbal information better, and all of this contributes to feeling more engaged with the world and more able to have satisfying kind of social relationships and social interactions.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. You've also found in a recent paper that was published that your cognitive training helps to improve reality monitoring in people with schizophrenia, which is like telling the difference between internal mental experiences and things that come from outside in the real world. Do you have any idea how that might work neurobiologically?
Well, again, I think similarly, when we've done imaging experiments with that, what we're seeing is that after the training, a number of different brain systems are working more efficiently and more correctly, if you will, more normatively. And so what happens in schizophrenia is you have impairments in different neural systems, and the brain is processing information in a fairly inefficient manner. And so it makes it hard for the brain to distinguish what's internally generated, what's been externally presented to the person. And after the training, as these neural systems are working more efficiently, more precisely, then we see that the brain is able to make those distinctions more appropriately.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense. So that's great, and you're also developing a web-based version of your program. Yeah, how is that coming, and when do you think that might be available for people to try?
So that work is being carried out by my collaborators and the people who have actually built and in a sense designed and built and done all the hard work of developing these exercises. And these are a group of scientists at a company called Brain Plasticity Institute and Posit Science Incorporated. And they have a grant from the NIMH to develop more exercises for people with schizophrenia, to put them into a more engaging kind of a format and to make them deliverable over the web. And that they're going to be carrying out a study, a multi-site study, to do a trial to see if this version of the exercises also improves cognition the way we have found in our smaller study when compared to just regular computer games. And if that trial is successful, then what the hope is that this form of cognitive training could be made available widely to people. But that trial is just starting up now and will be taking place over the next year.
Okay. So potentially you're looking for, is this the one you're looking for FDA approval on, the web-based
Yes.
version? Okay.
Right.
All right. So anybody's guess how long it might take, but what would you estimate?
Yeah. My guess is sometime in the next few years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's very hopeful. That's
Yeah.
great. And finally, do you know if this form of therapy of cognitive training might help people with other brain disorders like, say, TBI or maybe neurodegenerative disorders or developmental disorders?
Yeah. It's a great question. Many of us in the field really see this as an emerging new treatment tool in the treatment, the quiver of arrows that we have. It's a new arrow, we think, which is computer-based training exercises for the brain. You're right on target. TBI, traumatic brain injury, is a natural next illness to be looking at. And in fact, the Department of Defense has funded a multi-site trial with a version of the same kinds of exercises, but tailored more to the needs of people with TBI. That trial is starting up as well. We see this as potentially being useful in perhaps bipolar illness, Versions of some of these exercises could perhaps be modified and adapted for people with autism. This kind of training, not these specific kinds of exercises, but this general idea of training may also be beneficial in things like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in anxiety disorders, possibly even in depression.
Wow, that's, I mean, the whole gamut it could apply to, and you're.
Oh, and I should add, there's also some interest in perhaps seeing if some of this could be developed specifically to target some of the needs of the brain changes that happen when people have addictions. Some of the neural impairments that seem to both put someone at risk for addictions and also worsen as somebody goes further and further into an addictive illness.
Okay.
But that's very early work.
Okay, that's spectacular. I mean, I congratulate you for being on the forefront of all this, and really admire your work for doing that. So thank you, Sophia. Are you ready for answering some questions if people have them for you online?
Sure.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for appearing on Brainwaves.
Thanks, Brandon.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.